It's tea time, fools.
Instead of Nintendo got, like I said, they got really frugal, and they cut their budget instead of the workforce. So what most companies do at that time, as something like this happens, is they start cutting costs by cutting jobs and layoffs, and maybe they'll sell some things, some of their they'll sell some of their property or whatever. And Nintendo didn't do that because Nintendo sees more value in their workforce than them just being, looking at them as a dollar sign. They value they value their workers. They do, and most Nintendo employees love their job, and that in turn makes for a great environment, which makes for great games, and it's a good a good cycle. And a lot of companies don't see that. Some do, but Nintendo definitely does. So if you remember, the big wigs at Nintendo, they all took a pay cut. Their checks got cut in half. Wada at the time, who was the president, he cut his check in half instead of firing people and letting people go. And that was a great decision, I think, for the company in the long run. But at the time, it definitely hurt them. And so I believe, I haven't really found it in research yet, but I just basically me looking at what was happening, I believe Nintendo cut the Wii U's marketing budget significantly. And I don't think that's a crazy theory. If you look at the commercials, the way they were set up, it really affected Wii U's marketing. And not just in what they could spend, but in how the Wii U was marketed. Nintendo, going into the Wii U, I feel like they wanted to separate themselves from the Wii, because at the time the Wii was pretty much dying. The whole fad of it, was kind of dying, and Nintendo kind of wanted to make. I feel like they wanted to make the Wii U their GameCube and make it more of a core, quote unquote, core game console. But because of what happened with the 3DS, how the market was affected. And the yen took a hit, and they were losing all this money on the 3DS. I think because of that, they got scared, and they tried to Wii the market for the Wii U. They tried to Wii style the marketing for the Wii U, and that didn't really help. If you remember the first, I think that the first reel at E3 where they showed all those games for Wii U, it was like, they showed Ninja Gaiden 3, Razor's Edge, and did all these crazy cheering, and people were very excited. I think that's the kind of system Nintendo wanted to put out there, and I'm not even sure they would have called the Wii U had it not been for, like I said, all these other things affecting it. They probably would have called it something else. But I feel like, and that's why the Wii U didn't have a Wii remote packed in, which would have been a smart thing to do if you want to associate it with the Wii, calling it the Wii U. Pack in a Wii remote or something like that. But they didn't do that, and I think these are all things internally that was happening. So they got scared, and they said, well, we got to get maybe that Wii market to come and rescue us. But the Wii market, as we all know, had kind of went off into their cell phones, and some of them went to the 3DS, and said a lot of them went to their mobile devices, because iPads and all that stuff really was taking off at that time, and that audience had moved on from the Wii to that, and so that audience wasn't there for them. So they tried to capture that Wii audience again, I think out of panic, and it didn't work with the marketing of the Wii U. Now, I want to talk about the main thing people seem to talk about when it comes to the Wii U, its failures, and why developers weren't there for it. A lot of people will say it is what they hear from developers. Oh, it's harder to develop for, which is true. It was a different console to develop for when it comes to coming from PS4 and Xbox One, but not so much if you were a 360 PS3 developer, and there was still a lot of them around. And that's why I said before that I feel like the Wii U was at least a year too late. because I think if it had come out a little earlier, it would still hit a lot of those developers who were putting games still out on the 360 and the PS3. I think a lot of those guys would have also went over to the Wii U, and that's why the Wii U is designed very much like an Xbox 360. If you hear a lot of people talk about it, they talk about how it was very much designed like the 360. And the Wii U was a powerful console. People forget that because they see the games that came for it, but for a console to have an HD signal on your TV, 1080p, and for some games, not all games, but also be streaming to a gamepad at the same time, I know that takes a lot of power. And so you could say that the Wii U was hindered power-wise because of the gamepad, but Nintendo didn't really care about that. They never do. They haven't cared about that kind of stuff probably since, late N64, early GameCube, the power stuff. But that wouldn't have affected it especially if you look at the Switch. And so making this video, my point of that is to let people know that just because a system is a little harder to develop for doesn't mean developers are completely going to turn off to it. There's this console out there that you might remember called the PS3, PlayStation 3. It was notoriously hard to develop for, but Sony was willing to put in the budget, they were willing to put in the money to make that thing a market success. Not a financial one, but it was a market success. That way, there was enough of them out there for developers to feel safe to put their games onto it. Unlike the Wii U, there weren't enough out there for developers to go ahead and port their games. And that is the main reason any generation, that's the main reason a company, a system will or will not get games. The Saturn had 1,000 games. Yeah, you remember the Saturn? There were a lot of games made for the Saturn. Most of them were Japanese only because in Japan, the Saturn did really well. So there were a lot of games that came out on the Saturn that never came to North America because in North America and the West, the games, this console didn't sell as well. So even the Saturn, which was notoriously hard to develop for, if you look at where the games went, they went to the areas to where the console did well. And that's the same for any system. And now look at the Switch. The Switch itself proves that the install base and the game sales matter the more than the power matters or any of that stuff. Or the gamepad. None of that stuff matters. What mattered the most is the sales of the console. And if you look at the Switch is not hard to develop for. It's easy to develop for, but it's still very different from a PS4 or an Xbox One. But yet you have these companies who will go to other companies, other gaming producers, and ask them to port their game for them, like a Panic Button, to bring games that are PS4 and Xbox One games over to the Switch, regardless of its power. And people will still buy those games regardless of the fact that it's a quote-unquote lesser quality version. Those games still are selling well, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. So the difference is on the Wii U, no one was willing to dedicate a team for the most part, unless Nintendo paid for it. No one was willing to dedicate a team to bring a port over from PS4 or Xbox One, or even at times the 360 PS3, because the sales weren't there enough to warrant that. A company will put their games on any console that they think their game will sell on. Doesn't matter the power or any of that stuff. The Wii got Call of Duty games, okay? Like day and date Call of Duty games. Obviously lesser versions, but those games sold. They sold 1 million copies on the Wii. So that's all that mattered at the end of the day. So all these nuance, the power or the gamepad, none of that stuff mattered. The Wii U console itself gets a bad rap for being bad hardware. Bullshit. Like the Saturn got a bad rap for having bad hardware, but look at how many games were on the Saturn, and the market was catering to the same amount of main consoles. They had the PlayStation, they had the obviously the N64 and the Saturn. So there were still 3 major players out there, and yet people were still willing to put games on the Saturn because they were making profit on those games. And if you look at the Switch, it's the same thing. companies are willing to put these games, they're willing to port these games, lesser versions even, that because they still sell. And that is the bottom line. So all these other, the disc size and all the the gamepad took away from this, none of that matters. None of it matters. Only thing that matters is install base and ability for these companies to sell their games, and those games will come. And you see that happening on the Switch. Obviously, it's not at the same rate, but it's very similar to GameCube, where the GameCube didn't sell crazy well, but it sold well enough for companies to say, hey, we're going to put our game on GameCube as well. Not everything, but a lot of stuff we're going to put on GameCube as well, because there is a market there. Regardless of the install base, there's a market for people buying enough copies of the games, as well as, there was still enough of a install base to take that risk. Whereas with the Wii U, there wasn't. Once the Wii U started selling, the writing was on the wall pretty much for Nintendo. They knew. But the problem was their games weren't ready. And that's why I said the Wii U should have been thought of a lot earlier, and it should have came out a year earlier. And Skyward Sword should have been a launch title for the Wii U. And even HD versions of the Project Rainfall games would have been huge. I mean, an HD version of Last Story, HD version of Xenoblade Chronicles, that would have been a huge thing for the system. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. Like I said, I think it's way more nuanced than people want to make it. Third parties, once they saw that the Wii U wasn't selling, they said, we're not going to risk... we're not going to spend money. We're not going to spend the money to bring these ports over. You have to sell your console, Nintendo. And they got that right with the Switch. The Switch has way more disadvantages. It has one huge advantage being that it's portable, but it has way more disadvantages as far as the online, as far as it has the same disadvantage of power and being different architecture and all that stuff. But because it's selling, companies are willing to do those ports, bring some of their newer games over. We're getting Dooms and all this kind of stuff, and that's what happens. So I wanted to make this video to show you guys the gray area. It's not always, you can point to it's not everything. Everybody wants everything to be really simple, but my mind thinks in layers, and most businesses understand that. They think in layers. So that's just how it is. That's just how it works. And I don't like the fact that the gaming media, all media does, but gaming media caters to the simple solution, the simple issue, the simple problem, and not really digging into everything, because a lot of people just don't read that stuff. People want the quick, easy answer for everything, which it's sad. It hurts society. But I like to think in layers, and I like to go and get deeper and really find out what the issues are. So yeah, that's my video on the real reasons the Wii U failed. Do you agree with this? Do you disagree? Do you think it's a simple thing, or do you think I made a lot of sense here with all my points? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I appreciate all you guys. Thank you for watching and listening. If you like this video, make sure you like it. Hit the like button. Share it. Let people know Mizzah Tee is still here doing this thing. A lot of people seem to have forgotten. I'm still here, and I'm trying to do bigger things with the channel. So make sure you like the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.